All right, Alyssa, what's going on? Welcome to the Dad Edge.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here with you today.
I'm excited to have you. You have a little bit going on. You're a little busy. Tell us
A
about that.
li- little bit going on. Yeah. I'm pregnant, very, very pregnant with my second, and have a book that's launching now and, running a business, all the thing, and just momming to my 2.5-year-old.
And so, like, why don't you go and do some community service on top of it? Like,
Just add it in. Can we find a time
yeah,
slot?
just totally like, yeah, because or as my wife would say, like when I want to do something, she's like, yeah, because you need to do something else. You're not busy enough. Like, so well, first of all, congratulations. Do you know if this is a boy or a girl?
This is a girl, and I have a little
Girl.
boy.
Oh, yeah, one of each. Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Is this it? We done? Or are you going for more?
TBD. Yeah, just gonna go
Okay.
kid by kid,
Okay.
see how we feel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
See if this, one is like a hellion and then we might just be like, we're
correct.
done here. Yeah.
Maybe she's bonkers, and I'm like, yeah, we're good.
Yeah,
Or
we're
maybe we're
done.
like, okay, we could run it back. Who knows?
Yeah. It's funny. My wife and I, like we were talking about before we hit record, we have four boys. And a lot of people are like, some people I've said, you got four boys and their response is like, wow, like, whoa. I had one person like, one guy who he used to work for me, and when I had a full-time job, and he's like, why would you do that? And I was like, I don't know, my wife's hot. Like it wasn't really the
Why would
plan.
you do
Why
that?
would
I
you do
love
that? It's almost like,
it.
what's wrong with you, right? So 28 weeks pregnant. By the time you launch this book, which is, by the way, this week, congratulations, you're gonna be
Mhm.
32 weeks pregnant.
Yeah,
So there's a lot on your plate, but this particular book, really fascinating topic. And I started
thanks.
really diving into it. So tiny humans, big emotions. So tell us, why did the world need this book? And selfishly, I'm really glad you wrote it, by the way.
Sure. Well, I wrote what I needed, to be honest. Like,
Right.
I found myself, I have a master's in early childhood education,
Yeah.
and I was teaching in early ed and found a lot of resources that were like, do this with the kid. And I'm like, cool. And I like go to do that. And it like doesn't feel authentic, or inside I'm still just annoyed at this kid in front of me. And I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my God, they're being so dramatic or whatever. All these like feelings that I would still have about this behavior. And then I'm just trying to like say the right words or whatever on the surface. And I found a lot of things just like not working for me in practice. And a colleague came up to me and was like, hey, I think that we're doing something different. And so we started to like just dive into what were we doing, et cetera. And we ended up creating the collaborative emotion processing method. It's a guide for building emotional intelligence in kids, and we were teaching at a school that was attached to a university at the time in the Boston area. And we got to apply to do research for the method. So we researched it across the US. And it is 4 parts of it are about us as the adult, and 1 part is about interacting with the kids. And that's why I wrote this, because I needed so much more that was about me. And then, like, okay, cool. Once I have that under wraps, then how do I engage with the tiny humans to build emotional intelligence?
So wait a second. We can't pawn all the blame off on these kids anymore. Like, I really thought it was all their fault.
Dude, it would be so nice. So nice to just be like, this is a you thing, actually. Yeah.
You're right. Wouldn't that be funny? Be like, you know what? This is all. I know you're six, but all the problems are on you. Okay,
Yeah.
let's
Get
just
it
let's just
together.
agree to that. Right? So you're not the
Yeah.
first person to say this, and what's funny is that when I hear parents say like, "Oh my God, this child's driving me crazy. They're
Mhm.
terrible," and
Totally.
not that, oh my gosh, like we did face plants after face plants after face plants before my wife and I really got that one through our thick skulls.
Mhm.
And once we did, we're like, wait a second. So if we do things different versus expect that we keep doing things the same, this kid's going to respond differently for some way, some reason. Yeah, they're not wired to do that. And so when we started changing, they started changing. But I'm really curious. So like you mentioned that there are four things that
Mhm.
we do as parents. What are those things?
Yeah, so it's 4 different kind of like parts of the method. We have self-awareness, so really starting to notice inside of us what's coming up, what's happening. Really, for me, this is like a before I'm exploding. I'm so good at noticing, oh, I'm about to lose my cool, like now as I'm yelling or snapping or whatever. But like, what happens the 20 minutes before then? What happens throughout the day
Yes.
that like adds up to it? So starting to notice those sorts of things, that self-awareness piece. We have uncovering implicit biases. This is where we're diving into our social programming. The things like, wow, that behavior is really annoying, or they are so needy or high maintenance or dramatic, or all of those sorts of like descriptive words we like to put in the moment subconsciously onto what we're seeing that come from usually our childhood or our social context. Maybe it's things we learned in school or in our life over the years. And now they just subconsciously come up for us. And it doesn't mean they're wrong. Like, kids are often annoying and inconvenient. Like, that's also true. And there's going to be a whole story for them that we often aren't having run through our brain. We just have the part of like, oh my gosh, you're fine. You didn't get the color cup you want, right? Like, it is, this is not the end of the world. But like noticing those biases as they come up. Some other biases that are really common are around like age. So are there certain ages we expect kids to stop crying or stop expressing certain ways or certain things? Are there certain ages that we expect them to just like have certain tools for regulation, things like that? So we have a bunch of age biases that'll pop up here. And then we have scientific knowledge. This is where we get a little nerdy and dive into like what's happening inside of our brain and inside of our body when we experience an emotion, and then what's happening inside theirs, and how do those two things communicate. Like in the same way that just the other night my 2.5-year-old got like the deep belly laughs in the tub, and it's the cutest, like most contagious thing. But then also when he had that meltdown at dinner last night, like that's also contagious. Then like inside, when his body is flying off the handle, mine starts to as well, right? And so recognizing that and really owning that it's our job to get calm for them, not their job to get calm for us. And if we can't do that, if we can't regulate to co-regulate with them, we definitely can't expect a kid to do it. So there's 3. And then the 4th is self-care, which has gotten so buzzwordy, but for us, it's not like a weekend away or whatever, like cool if that works for you. But I'm more interested in how does your nervous system work and how do you take care of
Yeah.
it throughout the day? You know, like I am a sound sensitive human. And so if I'm like in a noisy space or my child has this just like god awful Thomas the Train that somebody got him for his birthday, that when it gets stuck in a corner makes this like clicking sound that makes me want to chuck it out a window. And it like drives me bonkers. And so if that is like that sort of stuff is happening in the background, like Thomas the Train is stuck in a corner, like that adds up for me. And so what are ways that I take
Yeah.
care of my nervous system? And um, we dive deep into the like 8 sensory systems, and so that you can figure out like what are you sensitive to and then what helps you regulate, knowing that we're all different there.
Wow. You know what's funny is, so this is obviously a dad show, but
Sure.
dads are notorious about not doing the self-care aspect of this, and we're usually flying too fast to do the self-awareness part of this as well. And we also think that our kids' emotional reactions, I think, are more about, we're doing a bad job parenting, and we don't
Totally.
necessarily, understand like, well, wait a second, like my wife and I were trying to break up an argument between my 9-year-old and 7-year-old last night. And they were really getting in the weeds and they were getting pretty heated. And I found myself becoming like, I just want to jump in and just tell them to shut up, and be like, stop fighting. It's not that big of a
Totally.
deal. Stop crying about it. Like it's over a marker, you guys. Come on, right? But at this,
So
which
real.
it just right, just instigates the problem even more. But
Sure.
I think we don't realize, and I'd love to get your opinion on this because you're the professional in this, is that, getting a marker taken away at 7 years old is almost, to us as adults, like someone took someone took the last piece of dessert, and it's your favorite dessert on the planet, and you let everybody know, like, I can't wait to eat this dessert tonight, and no one left it for you. Like, what in God's name? Like, you feel like you kind of got slighted, and like, number one, I'm pissed I don't have my number one dessert that I've been waiting for all day long. And number two, did anybody in this family even consider that I wanted a piece? Like, and you kind of like get butthurt a little bit, right? But when it comes to our kids, and that's like our family telling us, like, dude, it's dessert, get over it, shut up. Right. And we'd be like, what the heck, man? Like, it's more than just when we fighting about it. Right. So with our kids, I noticed last night, I'm like, hey guys, and I just got in between them and I said, hey, looks like you guys are fighting, obviously, over this marker. And I get it. Colton, you're probably upset because you wanted to use it next. Lawson, you probably had in your mind that you wanted to use it next. Is that correct? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, why don't we do this? So I would like for you guys to go into your room for a minute, not separately, but together. And I want to see if you guys can just come to a conclusion, and a compromise yourselves of, what's going to happen here? What's the outcome going to be? And they went in their room for about 3 minutes and they argued for like the first minute. And then they worked it out and they came back out and I was like, what'd you guys land on? And they're like, he's going to use it for the next 10 minutes and I'm going to use it. I'm like, okay, great. Well, hey guys, great job working it out. Right. Versus like, there's that part of me that just wants to be like, can y'all just shut up and stop fighting over the stupid marker? Like,
in my household, it would have been no one uses the marker.
Right. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to throw it away.
Yeah. You can't get along. You can't figure this out. No one's going to use it.
One of the things your book addresses though is what to do when your child is throwing a temper tantrum. And it's not about necessarily what we think it's about. What are they about?
It's never about the surface thing, right? So I had, at one point, I was teaching in the classroom and I'd come home and my husband was working full time and he was doing his master's full time. And I came home and he had made dinner and I sat down and we're all eating, whatever. And then he was like, hey, Liz, I have some schoolwork to do tonight. When we get done with dinner, can you just clean up and I'm in a piece? And I just started sobbing, like just full, like, of course I can do the dishes and clean up from dinner, right? Like, of course. But in this moment, it's not about the cleaning up from dinner. It's like, I had a really hard, long day. And now you're just getting my tip of the iceberg sort of thing. And I think so often with kids, what we're really seeing is the tip of the iceberg. And when we can dive deeper into like, what's actually coming up here, just as you said, like, it's not about the marker. It's, am I being considered? Do I have a voice here? Did anybody think about me? And sometimes it's simply like, I'm really tired or I'm getting hungry and now everything feels like a big thing that isn't actually a giant thing. It's why I actually don't believe in the phrase of like, don't go to bed angry, like with your partner. Because I'm like, no, sometimes you're better off going to bed angry and you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, I was just tired, right? Like I'm not actually that mad at you. I was just tired. And so when we are looking at our tiny humans and it looks like, oh, it's about the color of the cup, I see it as an opportunity for us to actually look deeper and be like, what's really going on here? Are they dysregulated where they need food or they need sleep or their body needs to move? Or do they not feel connected, right? So Sage, my 2.5-year-old, we were like eating breakfast, and breakfast is a time in our household that like we don't all sit together usually. I was at the table, he was at the table, and my husband was like getting stuff ready for work. And Sage started poking me with his fork. Very annoying, right? And frankly rude. A little bit. And I like this kept happening. And finally I was like, hey buddy, are you feeling left out? I realized that in these morning times, I was often having a conversation with Zach about like logistics and the day and whatever. And Sage was just sitting there eating. And I was like, are you feeling left out? I was like, Dada and I are having a conversation and we weren't talking to you. And he said, mm-hmm. And I was like, awesome. When you're feeling left out, instead of poking me with a fork, you can say, what are you talking about? Or you could
Yeah.
say, Mama, I feel left out. So giving him what he could do. And then now he'll say all the time, what are you talking about? We actually were just with my parents, and my mom was like, he keeps asking, what are you talking about? I was like, it's whenever adults are having a conversation. Now he's like, this is how I'm supposed to engage, to the point where sometimes that's annoying. But it has been really cool to just see him like, oh, at 2, employ this when we can look beyond that behavior. Because what I wanted to do was like, Bud, stop poking me with the fork. That hurts me. If you can't use
Right.
a fork correctly, I'm going to take the fork. But that doesn't actually solve the problem.
That makes sense. So what you're doing in that moment is, so like, let's talk about the fork thing, right? I think what most parents would do, my situation as well, be like, stop poking me with the fork, right? Like, but you don't tell them what to do. And it sounds like what you're doing is like you're putting a stop to the behavior you don't want to see, but you're also shining a light on the behavior you do want them to do. Is that correct?
Correct. You're so
Okay.
right. We often let them know what they can't do. And rarely do we let them know what they can do. We see this in so many relationships with kids, with our partners, across the board, where we're like, I hate when you do this. It's like, cool. I still have this need that I'm trying to figure out how to communicate. And until I know how I can communicate it, I'm going to keep trying to figure out how. So if you can just expedite that process as a parent and be like, here's how you can, here's what you can do. Now, it doesn't mean that the next time that he feels left out, he's going to say, what are you talking about? They're going to
Right.
need reminders and refreshers
Right.
and help like bringing that work into the moment. But telling them what they can do instead of just what they can't is huge.
It is, because I think that I didn't know this growing up, but we took Love and Logic, and they were really, really big on that. Praise the behaviors you want to see more of, and the behaviors that you don't want to see, give them options on what to do instead of. And I think as parents, all we want to do is stop the behavior that we see, because we just don't want to see it, or it annoys us, or it could
Totally.
hurt somebody else or whatever else. We just want to stop it. So let's um let's talk about for a moment though. I love this example of like the fork, right? It's like, hey, we don't do that, but you can do this. What about when they're in the heat of like a tantrum? I know you said that, tantrums aren't necessarily about us, and there's things that lead up to a tantrum, but in the heat of a tantrum, like where the kid's gone off the rails, right? What do we need to do to calm the situation down, but also not be like, stop crying, what's wrong with you, it's not that big of a deal, stop it.
Totally.
So what do we do?
Yeah, we have a full section literally devoted to this in the book. And we walk through the 5 phases of emotion processing. So, what does it really look like to respond in the moment to help a kid process an emotion? Really, because if we don't go through these 5 phases, what we end up doing is just kind of like pushing a snooze button on an alarm clock. We can make a kid stop crying sometimes faster, and then you're going to see another tantrum soon, right? So, what we're looking at there would be like, you could use fear, you could yell, you can startle them, you can shame them. There's like a number of things that'll often make it stop happening sooner,
Yeah.
and then you're usually going to see another tantrum in the next like 20 minutes. What we're looking at is, how do we respond in a way that helps them process their emotions so we're not just seeing that come up again. And in the moment is not a time for law enforcement, for delivery of justice. It's not like well, I told you if you run in the house, you're going to fall. Like, are you okay? Right? Like that first part for us is just like, yeah, we've been over this. That's the part of us that's like annoyed that what we told them not to do,
They're
just
doing
they
it.
did it anyway. And now they
Yeah.
got hurt like we told them they would or whatever. And so recognizing what's coming up for us in the moment and really trying to hone that skill of finding that pause between reaction and response. So that reaction of like, yep, told you so sort of thing. And then response of like, all right, that's not helpful in this moment. Most humans in the moment want to feel seen and connected. They don't usually want you to solve their problem in the moment. And a lot of the times we have to regulate so they can regain access to their whole brain. So the other day, we're here at my house and Sage is building with like magnet tiles. He has a cool castle thing going on. Another kid's here, bumps into the table, his tower crashes.
Oh no.
He's disappointed, right? Totally.
Yeah.
In my head,
Right.
I'm like, they're magnet tiles. You can build it again, right? Not a huge deal. So, like, say some of the, like, quote, right things in the moment. And then fast forward to I had just pulled up 2 baskets of laundry and folded all of them, and they're on my couch, and Sage comes through and destroys my laundry piles. In that moment, I was like, what if somebody was like, hey, Liz, you can fold it again. Like, don't worry. Like, great, I don't want to, right? Like, I already did that. I already folded this laundry. That's not helpful. Yeah, I know
Right.
I'm going to have to fold it again. That's not what I'm here for. And
Yeah.
so when we can, in that moment with kids, be able to find the empathy part of what they're feeling, not necessarily why they're feeling it. I don't think I would feel the same way if my magnetile tower crashed, or maybe it doesn't feel like it should be a big deal if they get the wrong color cup or if they don't get to use the marker first. But what we're empathizing with is what they're feeling. They're feeling disappointed, or they're feeling
Yeah.
frustrated, or they're feeling left out. And if you've ever felt those things, that's what you're connecting to. And I find it helpful to think for myself of like, what would I want in that situation? Right. So, like, if somebody comes in and sees that Sage has just destroyed my laundry piles, I want them to come in and be like, oh man, that sucks.
Yeah.
That really
Yeah.
blows.
That really
And that's
blows.
it.
Yeah.
Like, just holding that space and connecting over, like, yeah, that sucks. Not fixing it, not solving it, not trying to like silver lining it, of like, oh, at least you didn't get that pile over there. Like, nope, not helpful. Still got these 7. Like, I really want to think about like, what do you want to receive in those moments as an adult? And then how do we give that to the kid?
You know what's really interesting is you mentioned this example that you have of your laundry getting knocked over, right? Which I'd be pissed. Be like,
Yeah.
dude, I just folded all that. Right. And if somebody would be like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, come on, shut up. Right. Not that they would say that, but you're just like, when somebody says it's not that big of a deal, and you're like, you're right, it's not that big of a deal, but for the love of God, like, it still pisses me off.
Still
Right.
sucks.
It still sucks. But when someone's like, oh, yeah, that's frustrating. I hate when that happens. I'd be like, I don't need anybody to solve anything. Like, right. And the other thing, too, is that, so you want to hear something interesting about adults in this whole thing, too, which I'm sure you have a master's degree. You already know this, but
It's a lot I don't know.
so my wife, so I have like literally one of the greatest mother-in-laws on the planet. She is
Same.
phenomenal, right? And my wife is awesome too. But many of us, I think, stereotype men, husbands, dads as like, we're just going to come in and save the day because we don't want to deal with it. We just want to take away pain. We want to take away our problems and just move on to the next thing, right? So that's why we like want to solve things, and that's definitely not always. Most of the time, that's not the right way to go. It's just
Sure.
using empathy, right? A lot connecting to the other person, make them feel seen and heard and all these things and understood. Even the relationship my wife has with her mom, which is a very tight relationship, but my wife is very selective about what she talks to her mom about, even though, and she's gotten more selective with it over the years. And I'll give you an example why. So like when she goes to her mom and she's like, oh my gosh, like mom, like things are like really stressful with Colton right now. And he's 7, he's our 7 years, like really stressful with Colton right now. I'm like, he's kind of doing this, doing that, doing that. And like my mother-in-law would be like, well, you should be doing this and you should be doing that. And why aren't you doing this? And you should be thinking about this. And he should, and it's like literally like problem solve, problem solve, problem. And it's almost like in this tone of like, well, don't you think that if you did this, it would be better? So, and she's almost like, I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
On the flip side, you can be empathetic. Like, so for instance, I used to be notorious for solving the kids' problems and my wife's problems, and I couldn't understand for the life of me, like, why is this not being received very well? Well, now I understand. I have now for years. So even when my 17-year-old comes to me, he's like, oh my God, Dad, like I'm so overwhelmed right now. I've got finals coming up. I've got work and I've got this, and I've got that. I got wrestling practice. Like I don't know what to do. And I'll look at him and be like, yeah, dude, I've been there. That is super frustrating, man. Like literally you have so much going on and you're like, I don't even know where to start. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, man, I get it. I really do. Like, what do you think the right next thing is? And I'll just get very curious and just start asking questions. But the first thing is to be like, yeah, dude, I totally understand where you're at. Right.
Yeah.
And as soon as I do that, it's like he wants to talk, like talk and talk. And then he talks it out. Right. Versus like, well, in order to avoid overwhelm, are you being prepared? Are you being proactive? If not, we need to tighten that up. And here's what we need to do. And here's the plan.
Yep.
Like now he's making mental notes of like, okay, Dad is not the guy I need to come talk to.
Exactly. Who can I turn to when I feel like this is really what he's
Right.
asking. And the cool part is connection, which is what you're doing in that first part. Connection breeds collaboration. We all want collaboration. We want these kids to collaborate with us. It doesn't mean they're going to be like, oh, wow, can't wait to follow your boundary. That sounds great. Like that's not necessarily what collaboration is going to look like. But you are going to get way more collaboration in the space of, I'm going to now problem solve with you. I know that you're going to get curious with me instead of trying to solve it for me, Dad. Or even the like, oh, I know that I'm allowed to feel disappointed about this boundary that you're setting, and that I won't feel this way forever and I can move through it, and you're going to hold the boundary and do so kindly, right?
Yeah.
And
do it kindly.
that it's huge. And I think sometimes when they're like in the throes of a meltdown or a tantrum, like they're crying or they're yelling and arguing with each other as siblings, or whatever the kind of age range you're at there and what that looks like, we just have this urge to make it stop. It's often uncomfortable. It's inconvenient. Kids aren't like, is now a good time for me to have a hard time, right? Like it just happens. And it is often triggering in some aspects for us of like, maybe we weren't allowed to act that way as kids, or I can jump so fast to like my 2-year-old all of a sudden being 16 and me being like, no one's going to want to hang out with him, right? Like he's going to be a whiny, he's going to be bratty. And it's like, oh no, he's 2, right? Like we got a lot of time and skills between now and 16 to build, but you can fast forward to that. And I also have an incredible mother-in-law, and she lives a mile from me, and she's super involved in our lives.
Oh, nice.
And it's so nice. And just last night we're having dinner, and my toddler has a full meltdown. And he like leaves the kitchen. He's sobbing and like rolling around on the ground in his playroom, which is adjacent to the kitchen. And I went in and connected and validated, and he was like, leave my playroom. And I was like, okay, buddy, I'm going to sit at the
Leave
kitchen
immediately.
table. Yeah, get out of here, Mom. And I was like, all right, bud, I'm going to sit at the kitchen table and eat dinner with everybody. If you need me, let me know and I'll come back. And so I'm sitting there and I'm eating, and he's still crying. We can all hear him still crying in the next room. And my mother-in-law, who is incredible, was like, would you like me to go like just scoop him up and I can bring him upstairs and we can calm down? And I was like, oh no, I want him to know it's okay for him to have a hard time. Like I don't need his hard time to stop for my comfort. And
wow.
It's so hard to do in the moment, right? That like he gets to have a hard time,
Yeah.
and I can still regulate myself.
Oh my gosh. Can I share what's coming up for me here real quick?
Yes, please.
And I've been doing this podcast now for 8 years, going on 9, 1,100 episodes. And what you just shared with me, I've never really thought of in this way. But the majority of the time, when I want to stop a certain behavior, whether it's a tantrum, a meltdown, an emotional response, what's coming up for me right now is I want them to stop it for me.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
I really do, because I'm like, I don't want to hear you cry. So how can I stop you from crying? Or I don't want to hear you get really, really pissed and upset. Like hearing a child cry in the other room, like makes me very uneasy. Like it doesn't, I allow it to make me uneasy,
Totally.
right? And but the funny thing is that the story that I tell myself is, how cruel am I being that I'm not going in there and
Sure.
stopping this?
Yeah.
On the flip side, what I'm probably doing is he needs to learn, like, to regulate emotions and to somewhat self-soothe. And as long as I let him know, like, hey, I'm going to be in the other room when I finish dinner with grandma. I totally understand where you're at, and I know you're unhappy. And I also know that when you're unhappy, sometimes you need some time, to feel why you're unhappy and understand it. And just know that I'm here to talk to you whenever you want. I'm going to go back in and eat dinner.
Mhm.
And whenever you want to talk, like, I'm here. And I will tell you what I just said to you. I have rarely said to my kids, if ever. I'm just being honest with you, because
Yeah, I
normally what I
appreciate
would
that.
do in there is I would either s- I would either stop them from doing it because I don't want to hear it,
Mhm.
or I would stop them from doing it because I feel like I'm being a bad parent if I'm not trying to help them.
Sure. If they're having a
But
hard
I'm
time.
probably doing them a massive disservice, aren't I? Yeah.
I think it's so common though. We have this idea of like everyone's supposed to be regulated all the time. And unless you have a hormonal
Right.
imbalance, no one is regulated all the time. We all cycle in and out of dysregulation where we are a little excited or a little nervous about something, and then you come back into regulation, or maybe you're feeling sad, or you kind of disconnect for a little bit and you cycle back into regulation. It's how our nervous system is designed to work, to be on the lookout for like what's
Huh.
happening around us and to respond to the environment. And with this also comes moments of dysregulation. And we break down in the book the difference between dysregulation and distress. Distress being that like they can't regulate
Okay.
on their own and self-regulate. And so in those moments, like I wouldn't leave. I would stay. I wouldn't necessarily like just try and make it stop, but I would not leave. I would let him know, even if he said like leave, go away, I would let him know, I'm going to be here with you. Your body is safe. I'm going to stay. And that's it. I really wouldn't say much more in those moments. And his nervous system would ride it out. And then we would do a little repair after. But in this moment last night,
Wow.
like I knew he was hungry. He had gotten to the point of being hangry. And we just had like cooking dinner took longer than it normally does. And we went past our normal time and he was hangry and like couldn't sit to eat and then was just in this spiral. And I was like, yeah, he's not in distress. There's really nothing I can do apart from him eating that's really going to help him regulate. And I can't like shove food in his mouth, right? Like that's not how this is going to go down. And so, really, my only job here is to let him know that it's okay to feel what he's feeling. He's allowed to and safe to feel it. Now, we always hold boundaries. Like if he was throwing things, I would stay and either prevent him from throwing something or put him in a space where he could kind of like flail around and not hurt anything or himself. If he was hitting, same thing. I would stop him from hitting and still let him know like it's okay to feel this. It's not okay to hurt someone. But what's huge is like, yeah, it's not. If the whole goal of him getting calm is so that I can feel better inside, it's the wrong goal, you know? And but I think it's super common for all of us because it feels, I'm not like in that moment, like, oh, this feels really good inside. Can't wait for this to keep going. And if I am in a space where I'm like, oh my God, I'm so out of control that I need you to stop, that's where for me, I'm like, all right, then I have to tap into my own regulation strategies so that I can calm, so that I can bring that calm to him.
That makes so much sense. I've never heard that difference between distress and dysregulation.
Mm,
But that's incredibly clear, because I think a lot of times what is super confusing for us as parents is we don't know what card to put down. Or we're looking at
totally.
the cards in our hands, like, okay, these are my next potential moves. But they don't necessarily know the situation. They're like, okay, well, just out of instinct, I'm just going to use this one.
Yeah,
And then we go do that thing or whatever we're going to do, right? We don't take a pause to be like, okay, is my child in distress, or are they just not regulated right now?
right.
What do they need from me? Which card do I actually play here? And I say this all the time on the podcast, but like, if you look at anything that we do well in our lives, we have training behind it. We know what to do. We know the SOPs. We know like, okay, this is what I'm seeing and this is what I do. Or this is what's happening and this is what I need to do on my end. It's literally we're just winging it. Like we're just
Yeah.
like, yeah, just try to figure it out, which is so unfortunate because these are the most important relationships we're ever going to have in our entire lives.
Yeah, the stakes are
And
high.
the stakes are so high, right? But yet we don't know, we don't know. I'm also curious about children who do things a little bit more extreme. So like, and it's funny that we're talking about this topic that we're going to bring up here in a second, because I literally just got a couple emails on this. And, help regulate when our child hits, punches, bites, all of these things that we don't want them to do. And I had one guy literally email me. He's like, dude, I can't get my daughter to stop biting her little brother. Like,
Mhm.
no matter what we do, no matter what we take away or the consequences, like she just keeps doing it. So I'm curious, like, what do we do when a child is getting more physical?
Totally. So, first of all, I have like so much compassion for these kids because we all have different nervous system regulation or reactions to different things. So, some of us will go into fight mode more primitively, some of us go into freeze mode, flee where you run away, or fawn where you like people please. And you don't get to choose, right? Like are like quote good or easy kids, they often either freeze or they fawn, where they're like, let me people please my way out of this, or they just kind of like literally freeze and they're like, I'm just going to get as small and quiet as possible. And that's how their nervous system is just reacting. They're not in control of it, they're not choosing it. And same with our kids who go into fight mode. They're not choosing it. Their body is literally reacting to what they're feeling. And we'll find this in all of ourselves too. And different emotions might elicit different responses. Like for me, when I feel scared and if I feel angry, I'll often go into fight mode. But when I feel embarrassed, I will like freeze. All I want to do is get as small as possible. Like I would love to be hidden right now. And so as we start to notice those things, I would get curious first and like, what emotions seem to be putting her into fight mode? Because that's when we're going to have to kind of be a little more on high alert for this coming down the pike. When we go through this in the book, we separate sensory regulation, so like that nervous system, from emotional regulation, from language and communication. We call it the triangle of growth. So first and foremost, with the sensory regulation, I'm looking at how do I get her whole brain back online? Because when she is experiencing a hard emotion, her body's going to produce adrenaline or cortisol, and it turns on that fight part of her brain and it shuts down her rational thinking brain. So, this little girl might be able to tell you outside of the moment that biting hurts, that she's not supposed to bite, and all the things she's supposed to do. And then in the moment, her reaction is fight mode. And so, for me, first and foremost, I'm like, all right, goal number one is get her whole brain back online. There are a few different ways that we let another nervous system know, like, it's safe for you to calm. If you think of like two animals in the wild and like one animal gets big and is in fight mode and is posturing up, if another animal comes and is in fight mode, then they're ready to dance. They're gonna fight. And so for us as adults, if we get big, if our voice gets loud, if we send the message to their body, hey, I'm here to fight you, even if we're not saying that with our words, but like we're towering over them, we're getting loud, then their nervous system says, don't let your guard down. It's not safe to let your guard down. You need to stay in fight mode. And so first is going to be us of like, I say when they go high, we go low. So when they are like out of control, once release the bite, which hot tip for a bite, always push in, not pull away. So if a kid's biting, I'm going to push either the like other child's arm into that kid's mouth, or I'm going to push the kid's head into the mouth and it releases the jaw. And so I'm going to release that bite, and then I'm going to put myself between the two kids to prevent it from happening again right now. And I am going to get as quiet as possible. I'm going to, if at all possible, lower my body. If I can sit, awesome. If not, just as low as I can get. I'm going to drop my shoulders back so that they're not hunched forward. I'm sending all these nervous system signals to their body that I'm not here to fight you, which is going to allow them to start to regulate and calm. I might even literally whisper to them, and I'm going to validate, like, oh man, your brother just came over and took your toy. He just learned how to crawl and now he's taking your things. Gosh, that's frustrating. Now, this is really hard to do because in the moment, you're probably feeling pretty pissed at this kid that just bit your other child. And so it takes so much work on our part to be able to see, like, this little girl doesn't want to be doing this. This is actually not beneficial to her, and she doesn't know how to regulate in the moment to choose something else. Self-control requires self-regulation, and self-regulation requires self-awareness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, oh my gosh, your voice is so loud and your shoulders are up to your ears and your face is scrunched. Gosh, you look frustrated. I'm going to help her start to notice these body cues. In our research, we had a little guy who was hitting and kicking a lot. And we started with literally this. I would say, oh my gosh, your shoulders are up to your ears and your voice is so loud and your hands are in fists. Wow, you sound mad. And as we started to help him notice these things just by saying that, then I would step in and I would tell him, I'm going to be here to help you. He can't access self-regulation right now, so he needs me there to be the one that will regulate with him, to be in his emotion with him, to help him come down when he's ready. And we have a whole slew in the book of different coping strategies that'll help your kid regulate based on your kid. Because as you know, as a dad of 4, there's no one size fits all. Like what helps one kid feel calm is going to be different than what helps another kid feel calm. And so we have a whole slew of those in the book. But with this little boy in the research, what happened was he started to then say, my voice is so loud and my shoulders are up to my ears and my hands are in fists and I'm mad. And we're like, boom, yes, now he's ready to tap into regulation because he has the awareness piece. So this little girl who's getting so dysregulated and then she's biting, she's not aware of when it's building in her body. She doesn't know the signs before it's happening. So she can't regulate and then respond with intention. Does that make sense?
Unbelievable amount of sense. So hard for us to do it in the movie because I think we're actually overriding our own amygdala, right? When we see these bad things happen, right? This has been really helpful. I do have, one more question for you, and it's really just to debunk, I think, the belief out there. So, gentlemen, we're going to wrap up here in a second. We're talking to Alyssa Campbell, Liz. We'll call you Liz, though.
Liz.
Liz. Tiny Humans, Big Emotions. Book comes out this week. Make sure you guys go pick up a copy. Obviously, there's much more than meets the eye, and Liz has given us a beautiful 30,000 foot view. But I personally am going to go grab the book myself. This is going to be super helpful for me. This is what I want you to end with, though. I want you to debunk this myth, okay? And I see this all the time with keyboard warriors on the internet and on especially Instagram. I don't know what kind of people Instagram attract, but it's interesting sometimes. But here's what I'll tell you. What you just shelled out here, there's going to be a lot of people that hate you for it.
Oh,
right.
totally.
Because they're going to be like, that is crap. What that kid really needs is a smack on the ass and to get in his face and to tell him to stop biting, or he will never see the light of day again. He goes in his room. That's the way to handle a problem like that.
Totally.
And I've seen that, like, especially with like, certain strategies that we teach, we'll pull clips out of podcasts and stuff like that. And we'll say, hey, if you want to create an environment of psychological safety with your kid, do this, this, and this, right? And I would say 80, 90% of people are like, oh my gosh, never thought of that. Thank you. And then there's the other 10% be like, that's a bunch of BS. Kids need to be hit.
Totally.
Or kids need to be yelled at, or you just need to tell them what to do. This is not open for conversation whatsoever. Like, and it's super like it. I think the clip that we were talking about was an authoritative authoritative parenting style versus
authoritarian.
Oh my gosh, authoritative versus, you probably know it. I can't remember it off the top of my head. I can't remember it. And you've locked up again.
Nope. There you go. You're back now.
Okay.
Was it versus authoritarian?
Yes, that's it. And then that particular post, people are just like, yeah, it's great. You're just raising a bunch of yada yada yada, and you're
Sausages.
not doing the
Yeah.
right thing. You need so debunk this belief around like we just need to go back to spanking kids, screaming in their face, yelling at them. Like, why is that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, I'm just in it. I look at like short term versus long term. I am, I love efficiency, right? Like the most
Yeah,
efficient way to do something. I hate wasting my time on something. And so when
same.
I look at short term versus long term, when I look at a long term investment, I'm like, cool. If I pour a certain amount of time and energy into things now, how does that pay off in the long term on all fronts? Like, sure, if I continue to react to tantrums or meltdowns or behaviors or whatever, and I yell and I punish and I remove kids from this space and I put them in another space until they're ready to just like show up the way that I really want them to, whatever, what does that yield me down the road? And how much time and energy am I going to have to put in down the road when they're 10, 12, 16, 18, 20 plus? Versus like, what do I do now if I am connecting with them and like teaching them what to do with their emotions and what is happening in their body and then what else they can do? What does that look like for me down the road? What is it? How does this show up when they're 10, 12, 14, 16? And so for me personally, I really love to invest my time in the most efficient way possible.
Yep.
And if I am going to respond to behaviors from like a punishment or shame space of like, we're going to punish them, they're going to quote, learn their lesson here. Really, what we know is that we just keep seeing different behaviors pop up until kids learn what they can do, or like, well, I'm having this thing's happening in my body and I don't know what else to do with it. And so I'm not choosing to bite somebody, but now I know like, okay, biting, I'm going to get spanked for. And so their body learns, okay, don't bite, but it doesn't learn what can I do. And so it'll try something
Right.
else in the moment over and over and over and over. And really, just like personally, selfishly, that's going to require a lot of my time and energy down the road. Versus if I right now teach them what is going on and what else can you do? How do you notice what's happening in your body? How do you regulate? How does your body work? Then they can choose their actions. Then they can follow directions. Then they can collaborate. Then they can do these things. And I'm not saying do all this and have no boundaries. Like, absolutely, you should have boundaries. Just like I said, I won't let a kid hit me or throw something. Like, I'm going to hold their hand and say, I won't let you hurt my body, or I won't let you throw that. And still going to let them feel so that I can teach them what else to do with it and what it feels like in their body to feel that. Because we've seen what it looks like down the road and how much time and energy, frankly, I would have to put in down the road when they are 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 plus. And I would still be dealing with really hard behaviors because they don't have any of these tools.
That makes so much sense. I really like how you laid that out too, because again, we're going back to what they can do.
Yeah,
Do you think that I honestly think part of the biggest frustrations for a kid is like, well, what can I do?
yeah,
Like, I'm just going to keep testing here until you give me the direction of what I can do.
yeah.
Is
And
that
I mean,
pretty
if you want
accurate?
to dive into like research, if we're looking at punishment and shame, the results are actually pretty shitty. Sorry, can I swear on
Really?
this?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
The results are pretty shitty. And when we look at like shame, the results down the road look at higher rates of drug and alcohol use, lower rates of graduation, higher rates of suicide. It like really detrimental for kids when we are parenting from a place of shame. So if like that's a motivator for you, there you go. Like that.
No
And
kidding.
punishment and shame are very closely related.
Wow. I'm not surprised because, you know, when it comes to guilt and shame, I mean, those are levers that they're like, I think they're effective, but
Totally.
not,
I
and
actually am a
but not,
fan of
not,
guilt. I want to put that out there. Guilt and shame are different in
you're a
that, like,
fan of guilt?
yes, shame is where we believe, like, I am bad. Guilt is where, like, oh, I made a bad choice, right? And so
Okay.
guilt is about the behavior, shame is about the person.
Ooh, you were dropping some serious bombs. Like these are really, really good, and it makes so much sense. So say that one more time. Guilt is about
The behavior.
the behavior, but shame is about the person.
Totally. Like in college, when I went out and partied instead of studying for that test, and then I bombed the test, I'm not a lazy piece of crap, but I made a pretty stupid decision, right? Like the
Yep.
decision was stupid. And I feel guilty that I made that choice and got a low grade on that test and then that class because I made a stupid choice. And I know I'm not a bad person and I'm capable of doing something else next time. When you experience shame, you already have the story of I'm stupid, I'm lazy, I'm dumb, I always do this. So you're not going to see a different choice next time.
Interesting. This has been insanely useful. I know we're out of time and we need to wrap up, but I want to make sure that if for anybody who wants more, because obviously you gave us quite a bit, but there's a lot more to this story, and it's all in your book that's coming out this week. So, where is the best place for men to find you or connect with you?
Sure. On Instagram, as you were just saying, the dumpster fire that it can be is one of my favorite places to hang out. It's at seed.and.so. And I have a podcast as well for those of you who want to dive in. Voices of Your Village podcast, where we interview like a slew of different experts on things to talk about this whole parenting jazz. And the book is Tiny Humans, Big Emotions, and it's wherever books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any bookstores, all that jazz.
So you said your IG is at seed and sow.
Seed.and.so, SEW.
And so okay, great. We'll have that in the show notes for these guys if you want to connect with
Thanks.
Liz, for sure. And we will also have a link for her book as well. Guys, go check this book out. You definitely have given me some breadcrumbs. It's like the minute I'm like, oh, I've done 1,100 shows and I think I got this parenting, and then you're like, oh yeah, I'm back in kindergarten all over again. Like I know nothing actually.
I
So
love
this
it.
is super helpful. Guys, go to thedadedge.com/443 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/443 for this show. Liz, thank you so much for coming on today. This was awesome.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I actually can't wait to use some of this stuff tonight. I'm not even kidding. I'm not even kidding. I'm going to use this stuff tonight. I love learning new skills and then be like, I'm gonna go test this out. Like, 'cause I just love it. It's
love
fun
that.
for me. So thank you again. I appreciate you.
Totally. Thanks for having me.
You bet.